I will be not going on any more walks because I keep seeing weird shit in my area and it low-key feels like the Appalachian Mountains. Story time while I play with this slime. Trying to be on my health journey. I eat McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars. I eat that disgusting shit for your body every single day. And I'm like, you know, if I'm gonna eat this stuff, I might as well get some little more physical activity during my day. So I go on walks. I get my headphones and I listen to some music and I try to mind my business on my walks, right? But I keep seeing, number one, crackheads. I don't know why, but they keep wanting to chase me down. They keep wanting to attack me. I'm low-key fighting out here. Like, I'm low-key, like, fighting for my life out here, low-key, when I'm on these damn walks. And I don't walk that far. I'm maybe, like, 3 miles from my house. The second thing is yesterday. It was late at night, and I was hearing gargling, weird-ass noises. I'm like, what are these noises? It sounds like a legit monster. And then I hear my grandmother. My grandmother has passed away a few years ago. And she was like, Preston, come here, please. I need to talk to you. First off, I'm wearing heavy headphones, and it felt like it was right in my head. I was like, okay, first off, I'm not schizo. I hope I'm not losing my mind here. I look, and I don't see nobody. I keep walking. And then it gets deeper, the voice. It's like, Preston, I need your help. Okay. No, I'm not helping you. I don't know who you are. There's these woods that's surrounding me where I'm walking. I look and there's a creature like looking out from a tree like this. And when I look, it goes like this. It hides. I'm like, oh hell no. I start running back home. I don't see it ever again. But it was not human, I'll tell you that. So the mixture between the crackheads and the fucking skinwalkers, I'm just gonna be fat and happy and no longer go on these walks. And don't get me started on the dogs. I keep getting chased by dogs. But that's it. You like my slime? Damn.
Something creepy happened at Hobby Lobby today, and I think it has to do with my futon. I'll start from the beginning. I grew up in a haunted house. I've been able to see ghosts since I was 2. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences my whole life, but I think last night what happened takes the cake because I cannot explain it away. So for the last couple of years, I've had a futon in my office, and I finally found a couch that would fit the whole vibe of it, so we decided to move the futon from the office to the other side of the house. And to get it through the doors and everything, the easiest way was to go out my office door, around the side of the house, down the front of the house, and through the front door into the foyer or foyer, however you want to pronounce it. I moved it with the help of my youngest son. He's 18. So we moved it out, and you had to lay it flat, like make it like a bed to get it out and stand it on its end. So to get it through the door, that we went like that. We got it outside, we set it down, and we put it back up like an actual couch because it made it easier to move, and packed it all around the house. And then we get to the front of the house, and we had to put it flat again to get it through the front door. We had it turned on its side with the back part where it could fold up like this to make a couch, so it would fold down. So as we're going through the door, it's in 2 separate chunks. The front part fell over, and Carter had to let go and then push it back up. So we already knew that if it was standing like this, it would collapse back down. So we get it back in, and then we go to lay it down this way. Now remember, the part that, folds up and down, like the back part, was this way. So as we were putting it down, it slammed down. I've got the proof of that. I can put the bruise in here if I need to, but it hit my leg really hard, and then it hit the printer that we had setting underneath the entry table, and it hit it really hard. And I was like, oh God, we probably just broke that printer. I was over it at that point. I'm like, I'm not moving this an inch further. Just drop it. It took up the entire foyer, whatever you want to call it. So if you're looking at my house, my office is over here. The foyer is now right up here. This is where the couch is, or the futon. And then way back over in here in the back part is where Carter's room was at. So my office right here, the garage is right here. My husband came in through the garage, and I told him hey, FYI, the futon's in the foyer now, and it's completely flat. You're going to have to step over it, but it does need to be moved to the back part of the house because we have another room back there that we were going to put it in. He comes back and tells me hey, I moved it. I'm like, oh, okay. Did you get Carter to help you? And he said, no, I just pushed it. I'm like, how did you push it? And he said, well, it was already setting on its side. So I just pushed it, and I was like, no, it wasn't. It was flat. It was like laid down flat. And he said, no, it was open, but standing up on its side. I said, how was it doing that? Like, did Carter do that? So then I go and find Carter, and I'm like, hey, did you stand it up? Which would have been damn near impossible, because it took both of us to stand it up in the first place. And we both knew that it would collapse down, and then it would have fallen and hit everything on the other side of the foyer. So I knew he wouldn't have done that, but I needed to hear him say it. And he's like, no, it was flat when we left it. Like, I didn't move it. I had to step over it to go to my room. So who the hell stood it up on its side, right? I'm in like shock. I'm like, are you messing with me? Like, tell me, like, did you stand it up? And he said it was balanced on the way that the arms are, but he said it was completely balanced. And I said, no, because when we had it up on its side, the back kept like falling down like this way. So if it was setting like this, the back would have fallen down. And he said it was setting completely straight up like this. So I made him take me to the other room where the futon was at and put it back that way. And he struggled. He's 6'2", and he struggled to flip that futon, because it folds in the middle and does all this stuff, to get it on its side. And I said, don't you think that we would know if we set it up like that? Because it was hard for you to do it. So he swears up and down. He's like, that's how I moved it. I just pushed it. I pushed it on the thing because it was on the carpeted part of the futon, and I could just move it on the hardwood. He didn't have Carter help him. I didn't help him. The only way he could have done it is if he pushed it, and he swears up and down that it was standing straight up, which scared me, because who the hell flipped a futon, right? I'm telling this in my garage because I'm scared to talk about it in the house because of what happened next. So today I go and I get my niece Rachel, who can also see like the paranormal things and all that. So she's with me. We're in Hobby Lobby. We're walking around, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about the futon. So I pull her out of the aisle. We're like kind of, they call them like action alleys, but standing between two pods. Like, we're standing like in the middle where we weren't in anyone's way. And I tell her the same thing I just told you. And she just looks at me and she's like, no way, I can't believe it. Like, how did that happen? I'm like, I don't know. And I said, it's scary, right? Because what kind of energy can flip a futon? As soon as I said that, the overhead lighting only directly above us surged like it was going to pop, went out, flickered, and came back on. Never did it again. It wasn't the whole row of fluorescents. It was just the one directly above where we were standing right when I said, who would have the energy to flip a futon? It did that. Typically, when something like dark and sinister is around, I can feel it. I can just feel it. I can tell like something's weird. And this was like an hour ago. It's 5:16 now. This was like an hour ago that this happened. And I had been busy doing all kinds of stuff. Jason's ripping the bathroom out. So I hadn't had anything to eat all day. So immediately nauseous. As soon as the light flickered, I'm like, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to throw up. I was like, do you feel weird? And she was like, I don't know. I can't tell. I was like, I don't feel like anything dark's here. I was like, but what is going on? Because it scared me. It scared me. I'm not going to lie. And when the whole futon flip thing happened last night, I didn't feel like it was anything dark. But I've had scary stuff happening in my office. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know it always happens at like 4:30. Well, after the futon left the office doesn't really feel dark anymore, but that was my futon I bought from Walmart. It's not making any sense. I don't know if it's just because she doesn't like change, or if she was trying to help Jason make it easier for him to move the futon because she knew that we struggled so much to move the futon, because it's like this, it's so heavy. It's ridiculous, like a ridiculous, unnecessary amount of heavy. So I don't know if she was trying to make it easier for him. I don't know, but it scared me. I'm in my garage now. I'm kind of freaked out to go back in the house after the whole light at Hobby Lobby. I don't know. I don't know, but that happened.
I'm looking for a group of people that I'm not sure even exists. This message is wild. This came from someone named Selena. She didn't want to be tagged out of fear of ridicule, which I completely understand. People can be mean on the internet. But she says that when she was later in her teenage years, she started having very vivid dreams about a group of 5 or so friends who she would hang out with night after night in the astral realm. And she's not sure if these people walk this earth, but she dreamed about them with such consistency that she was sure that she developed real friendships with them. All of these people in this dream realm were around her age or a little bit older, but they would do normal teenage things. They would go to parties, they would play party games, they would go out in the woods and walk around at night because they couldn't get into anywhere else. And all of these dreams stopped when she was 17, so she can't remember everyone's name, but she knows that one of the girls' names started with a T, maybe something like Tasha, and she knows that one of the guys was named Mark. And in this dream realm, she knows that Mark and Tasha were growing closer. Mark actually remarked to her on one occasion that he wanted to ask Tasha out on a date. And in the dream realm, she remembers them actually getting together and witnessing their relationship blossom. She remembers Tasha gushing about how sweet Mark was and Mark saying how much he liked her. And she said she really enjoyed the company of all of these people, but especially Mark and Tasha. She remembers feeling like, I'm so happy they finally got together. When the dreams about this friend group stopped, she said that she grieved these people like they were real. She said she wasn't sure why these dreams about this friend group stopped, but when they did stop, it was abrupt. There was no goodbye, and she felt like she lost a part of herself. And she says all of this happened around 2016, but life sort of passed, and as it moved on, she sort of forgot about this friend group. But after she graduated high school, she felt lonely and like she was still missing this core friend group who she had spent so much time with. But in May of 2026, so pretty recently actually, she said she was trying to get more in touch with her spiritual side and she started listening to the Gateway tapes. That is a whole other rabbit hole, which I could probably go into in another video if y'all are interested. But it was around the time that she started listening to the Gateway tapes that she had another experience with this friend group. And she wasn't even thinking about that or trying to find them again. It just sort of happened symbiotically with her experience listening to these tapes. And so one night a few months ago, she falls asleep and she finds herself sort of traveling in the astral realm, like through what feels like layers, and she sort of comes to in her own body in a shopping mall. And there's also a lot of theories about mall world in dreamland, but she said she woke up in the dream in this mall, and even though she had never been there in real life, she knew the layout, and in her mind she actually worked there and she was clocking out of her shift. She walks out of the store where she works in mall world, right? And she knows that she's meeting up with her best friend from real life named Charla. Charla is already waiting for her in the food court of this mall. And she walks up to her and she greets her. And as they're sitting there talking, another woman walks up. And she doesn't recognize this woman, but this woman looks at her very strangely. She says her face was normal. It wasn't particularly beautiful or ugly, but there was just something about her that seemed off. And this woman was also dressed head to toe in red. Her best friend walks off to do something and she finds herself alone with this red woman. And she says, oh, I'm just standing here waiting on some people. And the red woman says, I'm waiting on some people too. And they sort of figured out that they were waiting on the same people, although in this dreamscape, she didn't know who exactly they were waiting on. And then suddenly she spots them, and the same 5 people from the friend group that she used to dream about come walking up to her and the red woman. And they're smiling broadly, and they start saying, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. Where have you been all these years? They say, we missed you so much. Where have you been? We couldn't find you. And they have aged. They are now around the same age that Selena is in real life. And she asks about Mark and Tasha, and they're smiling and they're like, we've gotten engaged. Selena is telling them, I'm so sorry, I couldn't find you either. I've missed you so much. And they all end up talking for what feels to be like 2 or 3 hours. She keeps apologizing. She keeps saying, I'm so sorry I couldn't find you. And Tasha is reassuring her that it's fine, that she has nothing to be ashamed of, that she's just happy that they can all reconnect now. She says that's what good friends are for. We're always able to reconnect regardless of the time that passes. And Selena feels a lot lighter, and then suddenly the whole vibe changes. Suddenly the friend group starts to look nervously around the mall, and the light seems to dim, and they start telling Selena that she needs to keep her voice down, and this isn't going to be the last time that they see each other, but it's going to be the last time for a while. Suddenly Tasha grabs Selena's arm and she says, don't be suspicious or they'll find you. And the red woman is still sitting there this entire time, and she also grabs Selena's arm. She says, it's time to go. They're here. Walk normal until you get home, and under no circumstance should you look back. Go. Selena realizes that this dream is turning into a nightmare, and so she says her goodbyes, and though she doesn't entirely understand what's going on, she starts to head out of the mall, and as she's walking, she hears someone running behind her, and not thinking, she turns around to look. And that's when she describes seeing a shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a duster jacket sprinting toward her. He grabs her by her upper arms, and for a moment he's just staring into her eyes, and then he seems to shift his gaze to something behind her, and she hears this flat male voice in her head almost telepathically say, they're here. And in that moment, she says she felt jerked out of her body and she woke up in her own bed. Of course, the first thing she did was call her best friend Charlotte, and she tells her about the dream, and Charlotte says, "That's weird. I think I've dreamed about the red lady as well." She remembers her as being a woman of about 26, wearing a red jacket, but she can't remember the details of which they met. But she said she's writing this to ask if anyone knows about who the woman in red is, about the man in the hat and why he appeared to her, and hopefully to find these friends if they're real. She says maybe if these people are out there, they'll see this video and reach out in the comments, and then she can connect with them in real life as well, so they can sort of put together the pieces of the layers of these dreams. She said that these people would be max 32 years old now in 2026. She knows that at the time of the last dream, Mark was working a 9-to-5 and a man that she calls T was studying. She said, "I just want to know if these people even exist in the same plane as me, and also who was the woman in red and why did she warn me not to look back?" Regarding the man in the hat, is he different from the Hat Man, or is he the same entity that she claims to have seen standing at the edge of her bed in her college years? Why was he running after her? Was he trying to get her, or was he trying to protect her from something else that was unseen in the same dream? Let her know your thoughts. That is her real name, but like I said, she didn't want to be tagged because she didn't want to be ridiculed. If you have a spooky, scary story time that you think no one would believe, or that you just want community feedback on, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
The doctors said that this boy didn't have a chance to live, so the grandmother made a pact with La Santa Muerte. Look at the cute hoops I got at TJ Maxx, they're little ghosties. So this guy says that sometimes when he shares this story, it's really hard for him to do because it does involve someone that he loved and cared for so much when he was little. He explains that when he was younger, he was really sick and it was something to do with his lungs. He remembers spending a lot of time in and out of hospitals. His aunts and uncles and his mom would take turns staying with him at the hospital, and it was because the doctors really didn't give them any hope of him living. There was a moment where the doctors basically came up to his family and told them that they needed to prepare for the worst. The one that was suffering the most because of this was his grandmother. His grandmother was a very religious woman. She would go to church. Obviously, he's older now, and his family would tell him that when this all was happening, the grandmother hardly ever slept, that she would stay up all night just praying for him. It even got to the point where the grandmother had lost so much weight that she was literally just worried about what was going to happen to her grandson. And apparently it was around that time where these weird dreams started happening. His mom was the only person that the grandmother trusted and told what was happening. The grandmother told his mom that she was having dreams of La Santa Muerte, but that when she would see her in the dream, she didn't feel scared. She didn't feel like she was something bad. In the dream, La Santa Muerte felt like something really calm, really peaceful, and that she went up to her and started talking to her. In the dream, La Santa Muerte told the grandmother that there was no hope for the boy and that it was going to end up really bad, but that there was still a possibility to save him. The grandmother didn't really think much of the dream, but she thought that was just a weird dream that I had. It wasn't real, until like a few days later she had another dream. In the new dream, La Santa Muerte appeared again and told the grandmother again the same thing. After that second dream, it left the grandmother feeling really uneasy until she had a third dream with La Santa Muerte again. In this third dream, the grandmother tells his mom that La Santa Muerte spoke more clearly and urgently and tells her, "Hey, this is your last chance. If you agree to come with me when the time comes, I will help you save your grandson." By that point, the doctors were really insistent with the family, telling them there's no hope, he's not going to live, and everything just got really intense. Apparently, the grandmother agreed to this pact with La Santa Muerte, and it wasn't because she wanted to die, it was because she wanted him to live. How she would give up anything just for him to have a life. Now, the weird thing was that after what the grandmother did, he actually started getting better. Obviously, it wasn't like an overnight thing. It did happen within months. The boy started reacting better to the treatments that they were giving him, and then he started to gain strength. And then they would do studies, and they would come up better than what they ever thought could. Something that seemed impossible in the beginning had become like a miracle, where this kid was actually doing good. After a year, he was completely healthy. He would run, he would eat, and he was doing things that they didn't think was going to be possible for him. Obviously, his entire family were very happy because it was almost like they had given him life again. However, a little time after this, something happened that nobody expected. There's one afternoon where the grandmother said she was going to go to sleep. She wasn't sick, she hadn't gone to the hospital. There was nothing wrong with her. She just simply went to lay down and she never woke up again. He was obviously way too little to understand what happened or why his grandmother had passed away. play. It was only years and years later where he was an adult where the mother finally told him the story about what happened with the grandmother and La Santa Muerte. He knows that some people are not going to believe it, but honestly, he doesn't care if you believe it or not. The important thing to him after hearing this story is knowing that at the very least, his grandmother did get to see him healthy and happy and being a kid again. But what do you guys think?
The person that sent me this story called it a mermaid story. I don't think I've ever gotten a mermaid story. This is exciting. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Jessica. Hi. Love your videos. I have a mermaid story from Australia that you will love, maybe? I'm writing to you after I watch some of your TikTok stories, and I have a story for you. For context, the legends around mermaids in Australia come from Aboriginal folklore, which is also known as the dream time. And the Aboriginal mermaid is very different to the kinds of mermaids that you may know about spoken on the internet, especially stories in Haiti and the few stories that you covered on your channel. Oh, apparently I did cover stories on my channel. I can't remember. Firstly, Aboriginals know the mermaids by 3 different names, depending on which tribe you speak to. The main one is let's see, Yok, usually meaning fishwoman. And the other ones are the Djomi and the Babara, which are described more like crocodiles or snakes rather than your typical mermaid. Each one has their own unique qualities, but 3 things are consistent between them all. Firstly, they are seen as spirits who protect the waterways. Secondly, they can shapeshift. And third, they eat humans. Oh, okay, cool. This is because the Australian/Aboriginal mermaid tends to operate more like a predator, like that of a shark or crocodile, rather than the more mystical and dark magical beings that you may hear about in your stories. As a result, most Aboriginal tribes tend to view them as neutral beings rather than good or evil, and the Aboriginals would attempt to be respectful around the locations where they live, but this isn't all the same for all the tribes. Despite this, surprisingly, they had a semi-good relationship, as many mermaids would instruct the women of many tribes in ceremonial practices. So on to the... Actually, literally, thank you so much for giving so much back information about mermaids that I didn't know. That was very interesting. I really don't like that they eat humans, though. That's not fucking cool. This happened in 2018. I was in year 12, what you in the USA call grade 12. I was 18 at this time. My friend, who we'll refer to as Jay, was at my place studying for the HSCs, which in Australia is our final exams for high school. At around 11 p.m., we decided to take a walk at night to a somewhat nearby park, which was somewhat private due to a lot of trees around the park, making it hard for neighbors to see what we were doing. The reason we did this was because Jay wanted to smoke some illegal substances, which I do not partake in, but was neutral about him using it. And my parents are against it, so he couldn't do it on my property. So we got there and we just sat down. We started hearing splashing in the nearby lake, and the moon was just bright enough for us to see something large in the water, which was odd, as small fishes are known to be in that lake, but we just thought it was an animal. But before Jay could start smoking, we heard it jump out of the water and splash back in. So we went to take a quick look on what it was, only to see nothing at first until a head popped out in the middle of the lake. We couldn't see any facial features, but it began to swim closer to us. We were wondering why someone would be swimming in the lake because it wasn't summer yet, and people don't tend to swim in most public lakes, maybe a few rivers. So this behavior was odd to us. When we saw her face and she looked normal, then we saw her torso, which looked human, and she seemed to be naked. So we tried to ask her some questions, but she didn't respond. Instead, raised her hand as if to ask me to help pull her out of the water. Oh my God, don't do it. So when I went to put my hand out to help her, she went from a normal looking woman into a terrifying creature and tried to grab me. I barely reacted in time to pull my hand away, but as I turned to run away with Jay, the mermaid managed to grab my leg and pull me down as she tried to pull me into the water. This mermaid was strong. I screamed for Jay, who had begun to run away, and thankfully turned around and ran over to help me. He jumped onto the mermaid, and the two began to wrestle a bit. The mermaid was clearly stronger than him, and he got a few cuts on his arms from her claws. They have claws? One thing you should know about Jay is that at this time, he was a blue belt in judo, so he ended up getting her into an arm bar, which is a type of arm lock where he broke her arm, at which point he let go and she went into the lake and we didn't see her again. We ran back to my place and decided to never speak of it again because who would believe us? We believe you. I believe you. Jay did go through a very bad suicidal and drinking situation after this, which recently has thankfully gotten over. Anyway, I hope you and the viewers enjoyed the story. I wish you well. God bless you. Thank you so much for sharing. I don't remember what I'm thinking of. Maybe somebody knows, but like in my brain, I'm seeing like a video. It's either like a video or like from a movie or like a show or something. And it's like of a mermaid, but then it like opens its mouth and it's got like all these teeth and it's like very aggressive. And I'm always like, oh, that's like not legit, right? That's not like a real mermaid. But apparently there's mermaids that are, I can't believe there's different kinds of mermaids. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying I can't believe that, right? Because there's different kinds, there's different species of everything. We literally think fucking the Hat Man is like a species. There's all different species of like aliens and ETs and all the things. Of course, there's different species of mermaids. Whoa, this is so crazy though. Has anybody else experienced or seen or heard of these kind of mermaids? Has anyone else almost been eaten by one?
Late night radio has always felt strangely intimate to me. One person sits alone in a studio speaking into the darkness, while strangers listen from bedrooms, hospitals, empty highways. Every so often, one of those listeners calls in, and two strangers who would otherwise never meet end up sharing a conversation. Tonight's spooky story is a reminder that you never really know who or what may be on the other end of the line. So grab a blanket, maybe a snack, and get settled in for tonight's Midnight Confessions, Stories from the Dark. Many years ago, I hosted the overnight show at a small local radio station where I played music and talked to anyone who happened to be awake between 12 and 4 in the morning. Because the station was small, I handled everything myself. I was also usually the only person in the building. That probably sounds unsettling, but it never really bothered me. The exterior doors remained locked overnight, security cameras covered the entrances and hallways, and the control room had a heavy door with a large glass window. From my chair, I could see anyone approaching long before they reached me. In all my years, there was only one night that scared me enough to want to run and never look back. The night this happened, the weather had been terrible since late afternoon. Rain hammered the roof and thunder shook the windows every few minutes. Lightning flashed so frequently that the employee parking lot seemed to appear and disappear from outside the studio. At 12:24 a.m., one of the telephone lines began flashing on the console. I waited until another song started, and then answered through my headset and asked the caller what they wanted to talk about. For several seconds, the caller didn't respond. All I could hear was faint static and what sounded like someone breathing far away. Eventually, a woman asked whether the red bulb above the control room door was still flickering. A small red bulb sat beneath the plastic on-air sign outside the booth. It had been flickering occasionally for several weeks, but I'd never mentioned it during a broadcast. She calmly told me that the bulb was going to burst in 5 seconds. Out of curiosity, I stayed on the phone but kept my finger on the disconnect button. The woman began counting down through the static. As she reached 1, the bulb burst with a sharp pop. I jerked backwards so quickly that I almost knocked my coffee off the desk. Before I could ask how she knew that was going to happen, the caller disconnected. A few minutes later, another line began flashing. As soon as I answered, the same static filled my headphones. This time, the woman told me that the telephone in Studio B was about to ring. Studio B was directly across the hall from the control room, but a roof leak had damaged part of the ceiling the previous year. The room had been closed ever since. Most of the equipment had been removed, and the telephone inside had been disconnected during the repairs. So hearing it ring should have been impossible. A moment later, a telephone began ringing across the hall. The call disconnected and the ringing stopped at exactly the same time. Until then, I had believed this was just a bored prank caller. The disconnected telephone ringing inside a locked room made that explanation much harder to believe, but I still assumed a person had to be responsible. I called 911 from my cell phone and explained that I was alone at a radio station where someone might be hiding inside. While I waited, another telephone line began flashing. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. As I listened to the static, it occurred to me that if someone was targeting me personally, I needed to leave some kind of record. I took a small yellow sticky note from beside the console and held it beneath the edge of the desk. From that angle, nobody could see it through the control room window, and the security camera mounted near the ceiling pointed in the opposite direction. In tiny handwriting, I began writing. If I go missing, I did not leave voluntarily. Check the call recordings. The calls began at 12:24 a.m. I was still writing the word leave when the caller spoke. Voluntarily. Check the call recordings. The calls began at 12:24 a.m. My hand froze in place. The note was pressed beneath the edge of the desk. Even someone standing directly outside the control room could not have read it. Yet, the woman had recited the rest of my message before I even finished the sentence. At that point, I could no longer convince myself that someone was simply watching through a hidden camera. I demanded to know where she was. The connection cut out. A second later, my cell phone vibrated against the console. It was a voicemail notification from my own number. I assumed the phone had malfunctioned. Then I noticed that the message was timestamped hours in the future, shortly after my show was scheduled to end. I pressed play. The recording opened with heavy breathing and the rhythmic clicking of a turn signal. Rain struck something nearby, and windshield wipers moved quickly in the background. I heard my own voice begin to speak. It was difficult to understand through the interference, but I could make out fragments. I heard myself say that I should not leave when the show ended and that I needed to stay inside the station. The message became increasingly distorted until only a few words remained clear. Please, listen this time. Tires screeched across wet pavement. A horn blared, followed by people shouting and the sharp electrical crackle of something arcing nearby. Then came a violent crash, and the recording ended. After the police arrived, they searched the building and found no one. Nothing else happened for the next 2 hours. By the time 4 o'clock approached, the storm seemed to have weakened. At exactly 4, I signed off and began gathering my things. I picked up my purse and coat and reached for the control room door. The internal line for Studio B began flashing. I set my purse down and pressed the button. The sound of static filled the room, followed by my own voice. The voice repeatedly told me not to leave yet. Beneath the static, I heard rain, a car horn, and the same frantic shouting from the voicemail. The voice kept me on the line for several minutes, repeating that I needed to stay inside until I received an emergency alert. Eventually, the call dropped. Almost immediately, an alert appeared on the newsroom computer. A large tree had fallen across the main road several miles from the station, bringing a utility pole and live power lines down onto vehicles that were stopped in traffic beneath it. It was the road I used every morning. According to the timestamp on the alert, it happened almost exactly when I would have been there had I walked out of the station as soon as my show ended. The next morning, the engineer reviewed the station's phone logs and recordings. Every call had been routed through Studio B. The system also showed that the calls had been placed shortly after 4 in the morning, rather than at the times that I received them. Once the engineer removed as much static as possible, the voice on every recording sounded exactly like mine. Had the final call not delayed me, I would have been sitting in traffic beneath the tree and power lines when they fell. The part I can't stop thinking about is when the voice said, "Please listen this time." How many times did this have to happen before she finally listened? As always, thanks for spending the night with me, and if you love spooky stories, be sure to follow for more Midnight Confessions.
The Shanghai tunnels are a series of tunnels underneath Portland, Oregon. Now, they go back to the 1800s when they were actually built and used to Shanghai people. Now, a lot of creepy stories have came out of the Shanghai tunnels. This is one of them. Now, there was this man named Sean. Sean grew up in Portland, Oregon, and he worked downtown. And one day when he was going to work, he ran into this homeless man named Eli. And he felt really bad for him, so he gave him $10. Well, he continued to see Eli, and they ended up becoming friends, and he would constantly give him money, like here and there. Well, one day he was downtown, and he runs into Eli, and he gives him a couple bucks, and they start talking. And he asked Eli, like, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Shanghai tunnels?" And when he asked Eli that, Eli just kind of like tensed up and started shaking and was like visibly scared. And he's like, "Yeah, I know about the tunnels, but I don't like to talk about it. I had a friend who went down there, and he said he encountered something, and he's seen something down there. And after that, he was just not the same anymore." And Sean was like, "But I thought they blocked the tunnels off, and you couldn't go down there." And Eli's like, there's a spot over here, on this one street. And like, I know a secret entrance and how to get to these tunnels, but I will not go near there. So a couple more times he runs into Eli and he decides to ask him, hey, if I give you $100, would you take me down to the tunnels? And Eli's like, no, man, I will not do it. Like, I won't go anywhere near there. So a couple weeks later, he's downtown and it's late at night. He bumps into Eli again. And Eli's like, hey, man, do you got that $100 and I'll take you to the tunnels because I really need the money. And he's like, okay, yeah, like, here's the money. Like, show me the tunnels. So he takes him a couple blocks and he takes him behind this building. And there was sort of this dark doorway. And he said above the doorway was this graffiti that said, no return. And he said that just kind of freaked him out because it was like they were going into somewhere where there was no return. And they then began walking down these dark set of stairs. And they found themselves in this maze of tunnels. So they make their way down all of these different corridors. As they're walking down this one particular tunnel, they start hearing crying. And they're like, where's that coming from? Like, what is making that sound? And it then began to sound like someone was just literally like wailing. And that's when they shined their flashlight and they stumbled upon like a hole in the concrete and it led into a room. So they walked into this room and they started to look around with their flashlight when over in the corner, they see this black looking wolf dog type creature and it's growling at them. So they take off running. They're terrified. Sean couldn't keep up with Eli and he ends up getting lost in one of the tunnels. So he begins just walking around in the dark, like, Eli, like, where are you, man? Like, I'm scared. Like, where are you? And that's when he hears something, like a footsteps moving in the dark. So he shines his light directly in front of him. And he said he sees this woman hunched over and she's bawling. She's crying. And he's like, ma'am, are you okay? She doesn't say anything. Takes a couple steps closer. Ma'am, are you all right? And he said, all of a sudden, this woman stood up, turned around, and she had no face. And this terrified him, so he took off running again, and he's like screaming and stuff. Eventually, he thinks he sees the shadow of his friend Eli. So he's like, Eli, man, like, come on, let's get out of here. Like, I'm terrified. Come on, let's go. And he said the shadow walked into like one of these chambers along the tunnel. So he walks over to this chamber, and he goes in, and he's like yelling for Eli. He looks around, there's no one in this chamber or room. And he said that's when all of a sudden he felt a cold breath breathing on his neck. And he knew there was someone standing behind him. He slowly turns around and he said standing there was what looked like this 1800s miner wearing some kind of lantern on his head. And he had a noose around his neck. And he just took off running as fast as he can. And eventually he did find his way out of these tunnels and he was just like terrified. Well, a couple days later, he runs into Eli on the streets and he's like, yo, man, are you okay? Like, what happened that night? Did you see anything else? And Eli's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, what's going on? And he's like, the other day when we went to the tunnels. He's like, the tunnels? What are you talking about? I don't go to the tunnels. And he's like, no, we went down in the tunnels together and we seen that like wolf thing. And he's like, you must be losing it, man, because I did not go down in the tunnels with you.
Let's talk history and horror. I'm a historian. I'm also a writer. And even though I'd say I've been a writer longer and more wholeheartedly than I've been a historian, my brand, both personally and professionally, has very much been geared toward history. That's certainly the case on this platform, where I've just been reveling in the joy of being able to put my hitherto unused degrees to work. But even in my personal life, I'm the history girl. The one who forces unsolicited historical ramblings on my friends and family, who makes obscure historical references and ruins happy hour by going on unprompted historical tangents. History is just like my thing. So it makes total sense that when people find out I've written a novel, they assume it must be in the historical fiction genre. In fact, most people are surprised when I tell them I write horror. Honestly, even I'm surprised that I ended up so firmly and happily in the horror genre. And maybe that's why I previously struggled so much with answering the inevitable follow-up question. Why horror? For a long time, I didn't have a good answer to that question, other than some variation of, I don't know, it just felt natural. Which is true, but it isn't really an answer. It's only recently, in the process of pitching my book and revisiting my old academic work and getting to talk to fellow history nerds on this app, that I've been able to articulate what I actually mean when I say it felt natural. Been able to pinpoint how history led me to horror and why my obsession with one naturally feeds the other. For me, history, the study of our past, memories, origins, how we came to be and think and live the way we do, is a discipline that inherently engages with ghosts and hauntings. Really, what is history but a world populated by ghosts? What is the past but a bygone reality that leaves traces of itself to haunt us in the present? History is itself a form of haunting. I can't tell you how weird I used to get whenever I was able to handle archival material. I'd be like, someone from the 16th century actually held this piece of parchment in their hand, squinted at the words as they wrote, breathed on the ink to help it dry. The page preserves not only the words they wrote by hand, but also traces of their breath, fingerprints, baby sweat, possibly tears. And when you think like that, I swear, you start to feel as if the original writer is somehow present in the room with you. Like you're communing with a presence across space and time. Every archive or library I worked in was a room full of voices. Every historical figure I read about was a presence that was still, in some small way, exerting itself on the world, even long after death. Every place I visited that had absorbed enough time and memories started to feel less like a location and more like a witness to a past that I myself could only observe from a distance. Which brings me back to the why horror question. Because once you've experienced history that way, horror, at least ghost haunting centered horror, stops being a separate genre. I would argue that horror is the mode of storytelling that engages most seriously with the work that history is actually doing. Horror is, at root, a subversive genre. And like any good act of subversion, it requires engaging with difficult, painful, sometimes ugly topics, unpleasantries that many would prefer not to confront. History is difficult, often painful, often unbearably ugly. Its unresolved traumas become specters that haunt us in the present. In that and in so many other ways, I feel like history naturally lends itself to the horror genre and vice versa. To write good horror is to write about grief, repression, silence, shame, and the specific ways the past keeps trying to articulate things the present isn't necessarily ready to hear. Every story about a haunted place or a ghost that can't rest is, at its deepest level, a story about a wound the world has never finished processing. So now, whenever someone asks me, why horror? I think I finally come up with a good answer. I didn't choose horror over history. I chose horror because it was the truest way I knew how to tell history.
Has anyone else noticed how all of these celebrities all of a sudden look fake? Like something is wrong with them, like they've been replaced. You know, most recently we've seen with Jim Carrey. He makes this appearance after being gone for several years. And a lot of people said, that is not Jim Carrey. That is not the same Jim Carrey we knew. And this has been happening with a lot of celebrities. See this sort of change in their appearance. They look very skinny. Their face looks rubbery. Something seems off about them. Now, there's something I was looking into. It's called the replacement replicant theory. And the idea is that humans are slowly being replaced by these replicants. And one by one, human civilization is slowly being taken over by these evil replicant beings. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but there was an interesting story that came out of Arizona. Now, there was this woman who lived in Phoenix. And she had been married to this man, Philip, for about 35 years. He was this really nice guy. He took very good care of her. And they had this really good relationship. But she said all of that changed one day. She said one day her husband, who worked third shift, he would have to drive an hour through the desert. She said one night when he was driving, he was listening to the radio. Well, he started to notice it was going staticky. And he began to hear this strange sound coming out of the speakers. And it got louder and louder to the point where it was almost hurting his ears. He said that's when he looked up and he sees about 20, 30 feet above him this very bright, glowing white light. And it caused him to swerve and go off the ditch and into like this big field. Now he manages to get his car back on the road and he makes it into work. But when he comes in the door, his boss is angry and is asking him, where have you been? Like, why are you so late for work? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, you are 2 hours late. And he couldn't figure out how he could be 2 hours late when he basically timed his drive. He should have only been a couple minutes late. So he goes home and he tells his wife about the story. Well, she said after this, he seemed very nervous. He kept having these nightmares at night. He kept talking about this experience like he couldn't get it out of his head what had happened to him. Then she said one night she kissed him, he got in his car, and he drove to work. Except he never made it to work. His boss calls the house, talks to her, tells her her husband hasn't came in. Is everything okay? For several days, she cannot track down Philip. Her and her family, they look all over for him. They have no idea what happened to him. And then one night, he simply strolls in the front door. And she says to Philip, you know, what's going on? Where did you go? Like, I was worried about you. And he said, don't worry about it. It's no problem. Don't worry about it. She said after that, she noticed that Philip was a different person. He looked different. He had a different personality. He was quiet. He didn't talk much. He didn't want to be around her. And when he was around her, he was very angry and aggressive. She said often at night, he would disappear for several hours at a time. Some nights she would catch him just standing in the room, staring at her while she was sleeping. And she said his behavior just came more and more erratic. And then one night he tells her, look, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm leaving you and I'm going. And she said, where are you going? And he said, you do not need to know that. And he got in his car and he drove away. And after that, she never seen him again. And after a couple of years, she just assumes, you know, like he didn't want to be with her. But then she said one night, she was laying in bed. She said she noticed that there was a bright light shining in the window. So as she goes over to the window, she said she could see this ball of light coming down from the sky. Comes right through her window, and it knocks her back onto her bed. The next thing she knows, she said she was in some sort of spaceship or some sort of craft. And standing there was Philip. She said, but it was the Philip she had knew for 35 years. He was normal. And he told her, look, you can stay with me. We're going far away, but you can come with me. They said I can take you. She said, what are you talking about, Philip? We live in Arizona. We live in Phoenix. Like, we can't go anywhere. We need to go back home. And he said, well, if you don't want to go with me, then I have to leave. And the next thing she knew, she awoke and she was in bed. She said she felt like her husband had been replaced by something else. Texas is a hotspot for black-eyed children sightings. Now, the first sighting goes back to 1996 in Abilene, Texas. And since then, there have been hundreds of documented reports of people encountering the black-eyed children in Texas. Now, there was a very terrifying encounter just outside of Abilene, Texas, in a place called Albany. There was this 80-year-old woman named Helen. Now, Helen lived alone in the same house for 40 years. She said one night she was alone watching TV when she heard a knock at the front door. Well, she gets up, she starts thinking to herself, like, who would be at my door this late at night? I don't think I should open that. So she just ignores it. But then the knocking starts getting louder, and then it turns into banging. And whoever this is, they are banging extremely hard on this door, so much so that it's actually vibrating the house. So she walks to the door and she says, go away. I'm not interested. Like, leave. It's too late. Leave my house. But then she hears a voice. It's her son. He says, Mom, it's me. Let me in. So she's like, Brian, what are you doing here at 11 o'clock at night? So she opens the door. But to her surprise, when the door opens, she sees these two children. They look around 11, 12 years old. They're dressed in all black. There's a little girl. She's got a black dress on. The young boy has some kind of black suit on. And she says, what are you doing at my door at 11 o'clock at night? And they said, please, help us. We're lost. Let us come inside. And she's like, what do you mean you're lost? And they go, we're lost. Can we use your phone? Let us come inside. So she said, why were you banging on the door? Why didn't you just use the doorbell? And both these kids, they look kind of puzzled, like they had no idea what she was talking about, like they had no idea what a doorbell was. So she felt bad, and she thought maybe they were in danger. So she opens her door and she lets them in. So she says, look, I'm going to go find my cell phone. I'm going to call for help. We'll figure this out. So she goes to get her cell phone, and these kids run off. And they start going into different rooms around the house. And they're jumping on beds. They're screaming. They're making all kinds of ruckus. They're breaking things. And so she goes, from bedroom to bedroom, following them around. And she starts saying, like, you need to leave. You need to get out of my house. And they start laughing at her. They say, Helen, we are never leaving. She said, look, I don't know who you kids are. It's time to go. And she said the one kid, the boy, he grabs her arm, which his hand felt ice cold. And he looks her right in the eyes. And that's when she realized he had these solid, big, black eyes. This was not a boy. This was something else. So she runs out of the house, goes to the neighbor, tells him what's going on. The neighbor goes over to her house, but when he goes inside, there's no one there. And he says to Helen, are you sure, like, this happened, like, it's late, were you tired, maybe had a dream? She goes, no, I'm telling you, these kids came into my house and there was something off about them. And that's when the neighbor notices these little footprints leading directly towards the woods.
Hello my icon legend queens, I'm going to tell you another paranormal story today. My name's Jessie if you don't know who I am, so let's get into it. I had a friend who swore he was a psychic. He read tarot cards for people and he was pretty good at it, but I never believed in psychics. This will be more important later. I was 18 living with my parents. I got up at 5 AM so I could work at 6. The stairs in my parents' room led down in the living room. I didn't ever turn on the light so I wouldn't wake them. The stairs go down 10 steps to the wall and then turn 90 degrees and have 5 more steps. I started walking down the steps and I saw someone stand in the middle of the living room in the dark. I assumed it was my dad because of the shape and size. As I walked down, he walked across the living room and started to go up the stairs. When he got to the 5th step, he turned towards me. I realised it wasn't my dad. It looked like a solid shadow standing in the middle of the stairs. This wasn't a shadow on the wall. This was a shadowy figure and it was standing still towards me. I tried to back up quickly without turning away from it. I slipped and fell onto my butt. It went through me and disappeared at the top of the stairs. My heart was pounding. My mum woke me up from hearing me fall and asked if I was okay. I didn't have time to explain, so I said I was okay, but then I went to work. Around 8 AM I was working at a gas station. My psychic friend walked in. He asked if I was okay. I looked around and didn't see anything going on suspicious or anything, so I said yes, I was fine. Why? He said exactly 5:15 when I was walking down the stairs that he was woken up because he could feel my fear. Before I could even tell him what happened, I hadn't told anyone what happened yet, by the way. He told me what I saw was a shadow person and it meant me no harm. I since then believed he was a psychic. Then if you go down the comment section, someone said, how did you know your friend was a psychic and what age? I wish I knew. I never thought to ask him. I only knew him for about a year. He moved away and we lost contact. This was back in the 1990s. Edited to add, he was very sensitive to people's emotions, and when doing tarot cards or oracle card readings, he went into depth about specific specific things. Other tarot card readers I've seen usually keep things vague and ask a lot of leading questions. All I know is his favourite deck was the Celtic and Animal Oracle. He also saw spirits, shadow people, fairies. We'll be having conversations with something, he'd turn his head and track the movements of something I couldn't see. Then he would describe to me what it is. Thank you so much for watching my video, and goodbye.
It will be 4 years this September since my boyfriend Paul passed away, and he is the father of all of my children. Ever since he passed away, I've had incredibly vivid dreams about him, and it's literally the kind of dreams where you wake up and you have to remind yourself that it wasn't real, it was a dream. But sometimes those dreams affect me for weeks afterwards, because it's like reminding myself how he feels, or like talking with him, or like being there with him in my dreams, and then when I wake up it's like I'm losing him all over again. What happened on the 2nd anniversary of his death is something that I will never forget. That night I dreamed that I was walking down a dark back road that I did recognize with Paul, and with him was a girl, and her name was Holly. For some reason, this girl Holly, she often appeared in my dreams with him. She was always the same. She was about 5'5", she had long dark hair, she was very thin, and it seemed like when she would appear in the dreams with Paul, it was almost like she was jealous that he was coming to see me in my dreams, but not in like a mean way. It was almost in like a playful, innocent way, kind of like Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, right? And I never understood who she was, but there was something different about her. She almost didn't feel human, even though she looked like an ordinary person. So in my dream, we were walking towards a carnival, and Holly seemed annoyed per usual that he was paying attention to me, but I remember that I was just so enthralled to see him. I wrapped my arms around him, I was sobbing, I couldn't catch my breath. I was so happy to see him, I missed him. While I was devastatingly clinging onto him, he seemed a little different. He seemed very happy, like happier than he ever was in this life, radiating happiness. Like the feeling coming from him is impossible to describe. I don't think anybody here on earth could ever radiate or feel the same emotional happiness that was coming from him. He kept trying to get my attention when I was crying on him. He just kept saying, "Babe." He said, "Listen to me." I could barely hear him because I was so overwhelmed with seeing him again. And he was just telling me, he was like, "Heaven is exactly how you see it on TV." He was like, "It's exactly like the movies." And I just looked at him and I was like, "What?" And he just kept telling me that in heaven you get to do this and you get to do that. And he was so excited about all of these things, and he just kept smiling big. Like he literally sounded like a child who has never been to Disney World and they just stepped into the park. He, in life, was more reserved and shy. Sometimes he was a little bit crabby, so it was so crazy to see him in this way. It's like he couldn't stop talking, and then he said something that completely changed this entire dream. He told me that when you're in heaven, you can actually see glimpses of the future, like things that are gonna happen to your friends, your family down on earth. And it would come in like little photographs or like little clips in your brain. Then he started to show me things, and it wasn't by like talking. It was literally like he was putting these clips in my brain. The strange part is when I woke up, I forgot pretty much all of them, except for one. And this one that he showed me, it showed that something bad was going to happen real soon. Now, I couldn't see exactly what it was, only that it involved the end of something, like a tragedy. And I started to get really scared and really, really anxious. Like, I thought it was about me, and I started to beg him to please explain things. And then his emotion, when I was doing that, he became very calm. He wasn't scared, he wasn't anxious, he just got very, very calm. He looked at me and he said, "Something bad is going to happen soon, but don't be scared. Like, everything is going to be okay." He said it over and over to reassure me, and then that's when I woke up. I remember when I woke up, I felt strangely comforted. I even felt a little bit happy, which was very confusing. But I couldn't stop thinking about what he had shown me, and then 2 weeks after that, Paul's best friend Larry died unexpectedly. Larry and Paul were best friends since literally childhood, and to this day, I will never forget about that dream that warned me about like this tragedy that was gonna happen. And I still can't explain it, what I was shown in the dream, but I do remember Paul's calm voice like telling me that everything was going to be okay. And then a couple months later, I had another dream, and Larry was actually in this dream with Paul, and he was his same self in life. He was very bubbly and happy. During the dream, I finally asked Larry who Holly was, and he said, "Oh, that's Paul's guardian angel. She gets a little jealous when he comes to visit you in life because she has a thing for him, but everything, that's fine, like it's okay." And I remember waking up after that dream, I absolutely was laughing because it just sounded so ridiculous. But the crazy part is, months after I had that dream, my daughter started to name her baby dolls Holly. She told me that she just really loved that name. As far as I know, there's no show that she's watched or any way that she would even know the name Holly. I feel like it just came to her. So whether these are just crazy coincidences or grief makes you have very vivid dreams, I know what I saw in my head in my dreams. And I remember how calm Paul was about everything and the certainty he had in his voice. I believe in something more than I ever did, but I'm still left with the question of who was Holly and who was she before she was his guardian angel?
Let's read a true story from a viewer. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. I just stumbled across your page and I'm glad I did. I am not new to all things weird, scary, and baffling. In fact, I can remember the very first time I had an experience. I had experienced my little visitor when I was 4 years old, and it came one hot summer night. I remember being in my bedroom. My mom was always leaving the kitchen stove light on. To set the vibe, it was the old amber light that would glow even in the living room. Something had just woken me up. I laid in bed knowing that something was off, so I didn't move and didn't call for my parents. I wasn't scared, but something inside of me knew enough to just stay where I was. I remember looking at my bedroom doorway, and from my bed I could see the couch. That's when I see a strange shadow cast along the wall. I quickly threw my blankets over my head and peeked through a little hole. I remember being hot and sticky from under them, yet I still didn't move. Eventually, a little thing, creature, or even monster, I supposed, showed himself, standing in the doorway, but never crossing the line into my room. He was short, no bigger than 3 feet tall. He wore no clothes. It was almost as if he was a reptile. His limbs were long and skinny, his eyes big and almond-shaped. They had a slight glow to them. His mouth appeared bigger than it should, and when he spotted me through the little hole, he tilted his head in a playful manner and smiled, showing his big, sharp teeth at me. I remember feeling extra sweaty in that moment that he made eye contact with me. A thought popped in my head, and it was, "You were the worst thing in the dark." I showed my breathing as if that could help anything. The creature's smile grew larger before taking this first step over that invisible line into my room. I didn't move. He slid his hand down my door frame as if he had a plan. Just then, my dad coughed in the room next to me. I watched as his head jerked in that direction, before looking at me and narrowing his eyes like he had been upset with me, before running away from my room. I watched the shadow cast over the wall again, just the way I saw him come in. I've never seen him since. I've always said from that day on that I am the worst thing in the dark when walking around in the dark. I don't know where that saying came from or why it stuck. All I know for sure is things have been strange since. Things like being able to know when someone passes, to spooky things that have happened. But for now, this is just the beginning of my stories. That phrase or that thought that popped up in her mind, it's almost like the monster creature is trying to convince her that she's the monster, not him. I'm not saying she meant it this way, but it could be symbolism as like being your own worst enemy. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to share, just send me a DM. I thought I was losing my mind. Then I found the crawl space above my room. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. I debated posting this because it still doesn't feel real. The police couldn't explain it. My family thinks stress made me imagine most of it. And honestly, I wish that were true. About 4 years ago, I bought a small 2-story house just outside of town. It was suspiciously cheap, but the inspection came back clean. The realtor mentioned the previous owner had lived there alone for decades before passing away from natural causes. Nothing strange, just an old house. First year was completely normal. The second year is when things started happening. I'd wake up and find kitchen cabinets open. At first I blamed myself. Then I started noticing food disappearing. Not a lot, just enough to make me question my memory. Half a loaf of bread, a couple of slices of cheese, leftover chicken. I even accused my brother of sneaking in as a joke. He laughed and reminded me he lived 3 hours away. Then my dog started acting strangely. Every night at around 3 a.m., she'd sit at the bottom of the attic ladder and growl. Not bark, not whine, just stare upward without blinking. She'd refuse treats. She'd refuse to move. The moment the sun came up, she'd act completely normal again. I called a vet, perfectly healthy. I ignored it. Old houses make noises. Dogs can be weird. Then I started hearing footsteps, very slow footsteps, always above my bedroom. I'd grab a flashlight, pull down the attic ladder, and search every corner. Nothing. No footprints, no animals, nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself the wood was settling. Months later, I installed security cameras inside kitchen, hallway, front door, back door. Every morning, I'd skim through the footage. Nothing. Until one night. At exactly 3:17 a.m., every camera froze. 43 seconds later, they came back online. The footage skipped ahead like nothing had happened, except one dining chair had moved halfway across the room. I contacted the camera company. They blamed my Wi-Fi, so I replaced the router. The freezes continued, always around 3 a.m., always less than a minute. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. One morning, I woke up and the lock was still engaged, but my bedroom closet door was wide open. I know I closed it. Inside the closet was a muddy footprint. Just one, barefoot, too large to be mine. That's when I stopped laughing about everything. I called the police. They searched the entire house. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No missing windows. No hidden doors. One officer actually suggested sleepwalking. I almost believed him. Then things got worse. I'd hear whispering through the vents. Not words, just two people quietly talking. Every time I got close enough to understand what they were saying, silence. One afternoon, I came home from work earlier than usual. The house smelled different, like sweat, like someone had been living there. My dog was standing in the hallway, staring at the ceiling and trembling so hard her nails were clicking against the floor. I decided I'd finally inspect every inch of the attic. Near the back corner, hidden under old insulation, I noticed plywood that didn't match the rest of the floor. When I pulled it up, I found a narrow crawl space, just wide enough for a person. Inside was a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, water bottles, a flashlight, phone chargers, fresh batteries, a small camping stove. Someone had been living there. For how long, I don't know. Then I found the photographs, hundreds of them. Some were years old. They showed me mowing the lawn, watching TV, cooking dinner, and sleeping. There were photos taken through my bedroom doorway, photos taken from inside my bedroom. One showed me asleep while someone stood only a few feet away. The shadow of their legs was visible across my blanket. I immediately climbed down and called 911. The police searched the crawl space. Whoever had been there was gone. They estimated someone had been living inside my walls for months, maybe even years. They collected fingerprints, DNA, everything. Nothing matched anyone in the system. I moved out that same week. The house was eventually sold. I never went back. Let me know what you think, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
Imagine answering one last taxi call before going home and spending the rest of your life wishing you hadn't. Let me read you a scary story. I used to be a taxi driver until what happened to me made me stop doing it for good. One Sunday night, I had a good shift. I'd managed to pick up and drive at least 80 people all around West Yorkshire. By 11 p.m., I wondered if anyone else might call, so I could just do one more drop-off. I thought about heading home to eat first, but I was only about 2 miles away from my place. Just as I got out of my car, my phone rang. I decided I could fit one more in, so I answered. "Hello, how can I help?" I said. It sounded like a little girl, but her voice was strange and odd. "Hello, can you take me to my mom's house, please? I'm in Undercliff BD3, and she lives near BD2. "All right, I'm on my way," I told her. I got such a strange feeling. What was the little girl doing calling for a taxi at this time of night? Didn't her parents know? It gave me goosebumps all over. I drove straight to Undercliff, and when I got there, I realized I was right outside Undercliff Cemetery. It felt so wrong, and there was no sight of anyone waiting. I was just about to turn away when I froze. I heard a noise from the back of the car, and the whole inside suddenly went freezing cold. That's when this strange little voice said, "Just keep driving, I'll tell you where to go." I had no idea how she'd gotten in. I hadn't heard a single door open, and I didn't even think about asking for money. Getting her home safely felt more important. "Go straight for 5 minutes," she said. "I live at number 5, Santa Monica Road." When I saw the sign for the road, I still didn't dare look around. When we stopped outside the house, she said quietly, "Thank you, I'm with my mom now." I waited a few minutes, then called out, "Are you all right there?" There was no answer. I looked around, and all I saw was a little girl's jumper left on the seat. I decided to take it back to the house for her. I knocked, and a woman in her 50s opened the door. "Your daughter left her jumper in my car," I said. The words she said next gave me nightmares. "I'm sorry. My daughter died 14 years ago." I nearly fainted. When she saw the jumper, she went pale. "That's hers. That's exactly the one she used to wear." She took it from me, still shaking, and just said goodbye. I never worked as a taxi driver again. Nothing felt the same after that. I still wonder if she visits her mom sometimes, and I'm so glad I never turned around to see her face. I dread to think what would have happened if I had. Now I only do school runs, picking children up and dropping them off. It's similar work, but it feels safer. And if you ever drive a taxi, please be careful. Never pick up a call that sounds strange or that doesn't feel right. I know I never will again. So if you were driving, would you have looked in the rearview mirror? Let me know.
Bro, what's going on around?
Let's read a true, scary story. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. I was driving from Denver, Colorado to Albuquerque, New Mexico by myself to visit my father. I enjoyed driving at night since it wasn't hot, there were fewer police, and there was less traffic. I was also younger at the time, around 19 years old, so I wasn't armed with a hand pew-pew. When I entered Pueblo, Colorado, I decided to stop and get some Sonic. I pulled into the Sonic on Santa Fe Road and parked across from the drive-thru in one of the order spots, facing away from the building. After ordering, I rolled my window back up. I normally wouldn't do that since I love the smell of fresh night air, but for some reason, I didn't this time. As I sat there waiting for my food and looking at my phone, I heard a very light tapping on my driver's side window. Startled, I looked up and saw a normal-looking woman standing right against the glass. She looked ordinary, but I felt a chilling sense that something was off. She motioned for me to roll down the window, but I refused and yelled through the glass, asking what she wanted. She shouted that her car had broken down and pointed to a car stopped in the middle of the street. She asked if I would help push it off the road and into the adjacent parking lot. I looked around, and the eerie thing was that no one else was anywhere nearby. Normally, I'm very helpful and was raised to pull over and offer a hand whenever I could. However, as I thought about it, a cold feeling ran down my spine. I sensed I was not safe. I politely refused, but she kept insisting and wouldn't take my suggestion to just ask the Sonic employees. Then she reached her hand into her pocket and used her other hand to try and open my door. Thankfully, my car was locked, which was pure coincidence. My uneasiness intensified, and I started shouting at her to get away from my vehicle. She gave me a dark stare for a moment, then suddenly ran back to the car she claimed was broken down. Immediately after, I saw 3 large men run out of the dark alley near the parking lot and jump into the same broken down car. She started it without any issue, and they sped off. Shaken, I said a prayer and called my father to tell him what happened.